Matt, hey, that's me. Now it's me. Now it's me. Now it's the Wrestling Matt. What's going on? How are you? Thanks for being with me, as always, on a weekday, 1 p.m. Eastern. At 1 p.m. Eastern, see. I'm just doing the pause thing. Does it work? I don't even know. Is he okay? He's okay. The Wrestling Match Show is at 1 p.m. Eastern every single weekday, right here at thewrestlingmatchshow.com. It's always right above Todd. What's up, Todd? How's it going? What's up to Joseph in the chat? What's up to everybody in the chat? Thank you for being with me here today and always. If it's your first time, welcome in. Welcome in. How's it going? Let's talk some wrestling. Huh? Should we do that? Is there a mic issue? Am I seeing that? Let me make sure I have this all correct here as we get the show rolling here. Make sure we're on the right microphone. We are not on the right microphone, and I fixed it. Doesn't that sound better now, huh? Thank you, Jeroy. I think we're good. I think I fixed it. There we go. Sometimes there's a lot going on here in the show as we're getting ready for things. What's up to Jeroy, Phillip, Wrestling Historian, B. May, how you doing? Thanks for being a member. Thanks to everybody who's been a member. Thanks to Nerdy Dude for handing those out. We'll talk more about that as the show goes on. Coming off of NXT last night, here's what we're going to talk about on the show today. Here's what I hope will keep you tuned in. Here's what I hope you want to hear about today. I want to talk about NXT getting the main roster rub. Now, I feel like every once in a while or every few weeks, we see a main roster Raw, SmackDown talent show up at NXT. Some bigger than others, but usually maybe one or two at a time. You know, it seems like Gallows and Anderson are more like NXT regulars-ish now. We have seen Chelsea Green, we're going to talk about today. You've seen Pete Dunne pop up, but it's when they load up the show. And what we're going to see in the next couple of weeks, we're going to see CM Punk not only next week, we're also going to see him when NXT debuts on the CW in Chicago. But also on that show, we're going to see Miz TV also on that show. If you caught the machine working hard to make sure everybody tweeted at the proper time, which is what they do and the right thing to do, Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill will also be at that show. Last night, we saw the Street Profits in the tag team title match as a replacement for the Rascals, only for the Bloodline to show up. Pete Dunne in the main event. Chelsea Green out there against Giulia. A lot of big names from all over the card from multiple shows. Does that make you care about NXT more? Does it make it must-see television? If you weren't going to tune in live, are you going to tune in live now? If you weren't going to watch the show at all and catch it after the fact, watch the recap. Listen to shows like this to see what you missed. But what I will tell you is, seeing some issues with the microphone. Should we get this fixed real quick? I don't want to go too far if we need to get this fixed real quick. Hold on a second. Let's make sure. Dom, give me a sec here on this one. Let's put up this for a sec. Hey, are we good? All right. Not going to be the typical mic today. We're going to get that fixed. But there we go. Do we have funny music? I'll take that. As we get into the show here today. Welcome in. Sorry. Technical difficulties. All that stuff. Yes, the Simpsons frame. Hello, everybody. Let's go. We'll restart the show, if you will, for those joining us. I am Matt Camp. It is the Wrestling Matt. It is a Wednesday here, coming off of NXT. And here's what we're going to get into on the show today. We'll start it up again for everybody. Hopefully this works out. We're going to talk about NXT getting the main roster rub. And I mean the fact that we have seen NXT have main roster talent pop in here and there. Mid-lower card people from time to time. But not always a lot at once. And that tends to happen when they're trying to load up the show for a reason. And a reason I think everybody knows they're loading up the show is because they want to have two very big weeks on the CW. CW is paying them what I would assume to be more money than they ever have gotten for NXT to be on the television, to be on broadcast the way it is. And now, let's load this up. Let's give them some big ratings. Let's make this a big deal to start things off. I've seen people at times, because I also know the second week will go up against a special edition of Dynamite. I've seen people from both sides complain about that kind of stuff. And I ask you this. Next week, CM Punk's going to be on NXT. Ahead of him being on the show in Chicago. A show that will now also feature Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill, the women's tag team champions. Punk's there next Tuesday. That's the Orlando show. So he's showing up ahead of the Chicago appearance in the Allstate Arena. I like the idea of that. I like the idea that maybe he is setting up something bigger for the Chicago episode, not just showing up for that. Not just a one and done kind of deal. Let's build out whatever this is going to be. He commented on the debut of Giulia and her match against Chelsea Green, and they hold the whole back and forth on social media. That is part of the machine, so they make that happen. And it's, hey, I want to show up next week, so let's talk about, okay, and there he is. And then he's going to be at the Chicago show. Bianca and Jade are going to be on the Chicago show. Miz TV is on the Chicago show. The week after, Randy Orton is in St. Louis. Last night, we saw the Street Profits step in for the Rascals for the NXT Tag Team titles. The Bloodline made an appearance minus Solo Sikoa. Pete Dunne is in the main event. Chelsea Green is in there against Giulia. How do you look at that? If you're, as a fan, if you watch NXT all the time, are you happy to see the main roster talent mix it up with the up-and-coming talent from NXT? If you don't watch the show live, does it give you more reason to watch the show? If you don't watch the show at all, do you have now more reason to watch the show? Does that move the needle for you? What level do they have to get to? Is Chelsea Green enough? Is Pete Dunne enough? Were the Street Profits enough last night? Did anybody look at the show last night and say, oh, the Street Profits are on, I'm going to watch? And that's a question. That's a question for the chat. That's a question for all of you out there. Obviously, if you're watching in the chat, watching live, Super Chats get you to the front of the line. If you have a comment you want to get through, a topic you want to talk about, a comment on what we're going into, question, whatever it may be. How much more do you care about NXT when the main roster shows up? They did this around this time last year, I think, to bolster the show, to sell it. Becky as NXT Women's Champion. Seth defending the World Heavyweight Championship. Mixing it up, rubbing up, with Carmelo and Trick. Judgment Day showing up. Dominic, Rhea, Priest. Making it a little bit more must-see television. I think it helped them sell the deal to CW. And at the same token, to be fair, they're going to feature some big-name talent on those first two shows. I continue to ask, what does the show look like after week 2? Does it look different in Orlando? Do they keep it on the road? What do you want NXT to look like? Nerdy Dude says, I love NXT, don't get me wrong, but I think with so many main roster superstars for me overshadows the NXT roster. That's just my opinion. I think you got to be careful of that. You don't want to make it seem like the main roster talent can run through them or steamroll them or overshadow them, whether it be on the mic or in the ring. At the same token, it's the third brand for a reason. So what kind of fight are they putting up against some of these main roster talent? Now, last night, we saw Chelsea Green and Pete Dunne both lose to NXT talent. Julia defeated Chelsea Green. Pete Dunne lost to Trick Williams. I do want to stop on that one for a second. Because Pete Dunne, I think, has been one of the busiest guys. Pete Dunne is clearly reliable in the eyes of Triple H and Shawn Michaels, as he should be. Pete Dunne burst on the scene when he did with NXT UK and made a name for himself at a very young age and has gone, from what I could tell, all in on, moving his family and living in Florida. And I know he's aged in some things. I don't know if he will ever get to bigger heights, but to me, Pete Dunne has turned himself into a valuable commodity. The kind of wrestler that Trick Williams should be working against more. That's going to make Trick Williams better. I will say one thing here. I did not like the finish of the main event last night. You have them go up into the crow's nest, whatever the thing that's called, and Pete hits the Russian leg sweep off it through a table. So sure, it damages both guys. I get that. And then Ethan Page comes out, and I think the idea was, his distraction. He didn't wait. He didn't want Trick to win, and Trick gets up because he sees Ethan Page, and he backdrops him, and he wins the match. Which, to me, is a fluky finish. Because the move was done to him. I understand it hurts both guys, right? I get that. But he just kind of got up and was like, oh, there's Ethan Page. I'm going to backdrop him. And he wins the match. What did that do for Trick? Trick should not be in a position where he is being presented as someone that wins in such a way. He could have... The move got done to him. He beats the count. He wins. Pete's still down. Did Pete look dumb? Did he beat himself? Why does Trick have to escape by the skin of his teeth? He's Trick. He should be pushed hard. I think he was in a weird kind of booking purgatory when he lost the title. And I don't think they put enough roadblocks in his way. And, he was involved in as a referee in the match with Joe Henry and Ethan Page. And I'm still not sure what the point of that was, other than to get him on the pay-per-view. And I didn't like that he danced with Joe Hendry about the title. Like, how is this strengthening him? What is he learning from this? Last night, he went through probably one of the quicker last man standing matches that you will see against a very good opponent in Pete Dunne. And you hope Trick learns something like that. But I'd rather see Trick, clearly win the match. Clearly be the aggressor at the end of the match. It just came across fluky to me. And that's not how Pete Dunne and Trick Williams should have a finish to the match. It's not how Trick Williams should win a match. But once again, to the point, Pete Dunne, Bloodline, Street Profits, all on the show last night. Did I care more about the show? Not really. Now I hear CM Punk's going to show up. And I got, now there's at least curiosity there. There's a curiosity of why is CM Punk coming to NXT? Why is he coming to Orlando next week? Why is he doing it ahead of his appearance in Chicago? Is he setting up a match? Says he has an idea. Is he setting up a tag match? And here's the fun part to me. As soon as I heard that CM Punk was announced, I went, there's an opportunity to get McIntyre involved. There's an opportunity, and why wouldn't there be? Why, honestly, would go against the story of CM Punk and Drew McIntyre if an appearance by CM Punk announced a week in advance did not lead to Drew McIntyre being in the building, which adds even more juice. And I would have to think I'm not the only one that thinks that. If CM Punk is around, then Drew McIntyre is not far behind, which I would hope would add to the intrigue of CM Punk showing up next week and then showing up in 2 weeks in Chicago. They did the social media back and forth with Bianca and Jade and Shawn Michaels, and they're going to be on the show. What does that tag team title or appearance or match or whatever look like? Jade had what? One appearance in NXT. She watched an NXT Women's Tag Championship match one time. That was it, I think. Maybe one other time besides that. Obviously, Bianca came up through NXT. You know, once again, though, are they having a match? Are they going to be, you know, part of a 6-woman tag match? Do they put a babyface with them? A Sol Ruka? A Jada Parker, who I believe is now settled into kind of a badass babyface role. What does the Miz TV episode look like? God, him and Ethan Page would be interesting. I could see something with that. Hey, here you go. Let's see how the D'Angelo family, in their gimmick, works with main roster talent. Like, let's see Miz TV with the D'Angelo family next week. Does that look right? Will that come across right? Because I have said, as much as I think that group has something and they're all talented, it's hard to see that gimmick with a low ceiling working on Raw or SmackDown. You know what? Here's a great way to test that out. Put them on Miz TV next week. See how Tony handles himself. Miz is a pro's pro. Miz will do everything he is supposed to and everything in his power to make sure something like that worked. And does work. I'd like to see that next week. Think about here's an easy one. Here's another easy one. Punk shows up next week. Drew takes him out, right? Drew gets escorted out of the building. What if he just passed Obafemi on the way out? What if there was just a sizing up of that? That's it. Something as simple as that. Just something as simple as that. And you can revisit that down the road. Little things like that will make the most of these main roster appearances. That's where they're important. That's not about a match. That's not about a promo. That's just going, let's just plant that seed. And it might take a couple of years for it to grow. But what does it look like when Obafemi and Drew McIntyre are on the screen together? How excited would that get people? Just throw that up. Just throw that little 5-second clip on social media. See what happens. That's how you get the most out of this main roster talent. That's where the rub comes from. And the idea of CM Punk being there adds the fact that maybe Drew McIntyre could be there as well. And as I mentioned, and as I saw somebody mention, the second episode of NXT on CW is in St. Louis with Randy Orton. But it's also a night where Dynamite has to run on a Tuesday. So I would expect that episode to also get loaded up a little bit more. And we'll see how they build to that in the coming weeks. Also, don't forget, that's right around Bad Blood time. So you throw that to the equation as well. If I am not mistaken, let me just check the date here. But I believe that Bad Blood, the go-home week, is the debut of CW for NXT. which October 5. So yes, that makes sense. That all of a sudden adds to the go-home week. So now the go-home week for Bad Blood on October 1st could have back-to-back interactions with CM Punk and Drew McIntyre and Raw on NXT. You want to build that up more? And you do it in Chicago? Now you've made NXT on CW a part of the build for your next premium live event and what should be the main event of that show. Drew McIntyre and CM Punk. What about the idea of Punk being in a tag match on that night? And Drew gets involved, and there's a big brawl to end that show. I am always a fan. Old school wrestling booking. Go home week. Massive brawl. Pull apart. Absolute anarchy to go off the air. Put Punk in some kind of tag match in Chicago. Put him in there, alongside Trick, or pick your male babyface, Joe Hendry, whatever it might be. Do an all-star tag match, right? Give me 3 heels on one side, go Ethan Page. But I know, once again, Trick and Ethan are the first show. So there's that, which that'll main event. But there's a lot. There's a lot you could do with it. There's a lot you could do with CM Punk and Drew McIntyre. And as I'm talking through it, I can see why people would be intrigued and want to know what's going to happen. This works. But the key is getting something out of it for the talent that are going to be there past October 1st, past October 8th when Randy Orton's not there anymore. How do you elevate talent that way with these main roster talents showing up? That's what NXT has the task of doing. Did you get more intrigued, more interested in SmackDown moving to USA on Friday because the Bloodline showed up and attacked the Street Profits? By the way, on Friday on SmackDown, you had the Bloodline beat DIY and the Street Profits and Montez Ford get pinned. And then last night, you had the Street Profits get attacked and taken out by the Bloodline. Did those guys do something? We've had this conversation on the show before. Can we pick somebody besides the Street Profits? Can we pick somebody besides Montez Ford? Because if you're going to tell me it's going to lead to something, sure, but there's no evidence of that. I know Bianca was on, I think, The Ringer, talking about how Montez, in real life, feels guilty about the idea of being a single star. And that made me wonder if, someone needs to take up his cause a little bit more. But my goodness, why is he getting pinned and then beat up in the span of, 4 days, 5 days? Is that the right person to do that with? I get wanting to juice up NXT a little bit and having Bloodline show up, but was it necessary? I guess you didn't want to do a real finish. Who knows if it was storyline to get the Rascals out of there. That seemed odd. There seems to be some kind of disconnect there. Because it was a big enough deal to have the Street Profits show up. Back to NXT, where they were tag team champions, where they got going. Man, lot to feed them to the Bloodline again. I had a Solo and Cody in the cage on Friday. That one bothered me. But Solo and Cody in the cage on Friday, and you got to, I guess the idea is you got to build the Bloodline up as much as you can because you're pointing them at Roman and still Cody. So others will have to sacrifice. I just think they got to pick the right people to sacrifice in that spot. And you got to play that role sometimes. But man, it feels like the Profits have played that role a lot when it comes to the Bloodline, original or new flavor. Let's talk about the value of Chelsea Green. I think Chelsea Green is someone who, when you look pound for pound at her role in the company and how she performs in it, in terms of how she handles her role, which is not in the main event, but is a very consistently booked, regularly used character, whether it in matches or promos or backstages or social media stuff. You can see how valuable she is to the company by how much she's used and the spot she is put in. I think a lot of people who are trying to find their way in wrestling should study her, because she had to find her way in wrestling. Go look at her cage match. Go look at how many places she has worked, the ups and the downs in WWE, out of WWE, NWA, TNA. The original All In she worked at. Chelsea Green has kind of become like the Forrest Gump of wrestling in the last 10 years. Gee, she's what, the therapist or whatever in one of the Daniels, the Daniel Bryan angles from years ago? And look how they used her last week. She's a great red herring. Roxanne, you know something big's coming, and Chelsea Green comes out to get her title shot again. But it's just there. Why? So she could make Giulia look good without Roxanne taking any bumps, without giving up that physical confrontation. Roxanne gets to see right in front of her eyes, oh boy, this is what Giulia can do. Chelsea Green has done acting classes. Chelsea Green has learned on her own, learned from her husband. The run they went on the indies together, being able to get that kind of heat, hearkening back to stuff from ECW, what they did in GCW, her willing to take bumps, her willing to get in there with the guys, what she did in Lucha Underground. Like I said, go look at her cage match profile. Cagematch.net, for people who don't know what that is. You can find pretty much any match anyone's ever wrestled, when it happened, all that. That is someone who I would want to have when I started a wrestling company. That is someone who takes no time off in terms of, am I needed? Did I work last night? Yeah, okay, you need me here, I'm there. Who doesn't take a night off when she's booked. Who puts everything into everything she does. To the point that I think, while the end of the Women's Royal Rumble this year was very star-studded and was a lot about Jade and obviously Bayley winning and all that stuff, and you saw the big name talent that was sitting on the ground looking at Bayley celebrating. The first half of that Royal Rumble this year was the Chelsea Green Rumble. I told her that to her. I said, you own that Rumble. Not about winning it, not about eliminating people, but her presence in that Rumble was awesome. Was fun. She added to the Rumble. She adds to all of her segments. This is someone who has wrestled in Stardom. There's a famous, if you haven't seen the clip, that drop kick she takes in the face. She is a world traveler. She used to live in Australia and work at Hooters. Like, you name it, she's done it in life. And has now found her spot. To the point that there's that balance. That she's so good at what she does that people want to start rooting for her. And I think I felt a little of that when she wrestled Roxanne. I think it was Roxanne a few months back at NXT. I interviewed her on Busted Open. And people were behind her. And she has that kind of reputation because she's worked in front of that NXT crowd that knows her, that they were cheering for her. They cheered for her last week. She got a little bit of a pop last night. Obviously, she was there to put over Julia, and she made that look good. But she was able to add to the presentation of Julia. And that was about showcasing Julia last night. And they did that. And Chelsea Green deserves credit for that. And I do think there's the danger of her getting over, and then you want to cheer her, and then I think you kind of lose a little bit of that. Because I think the whole thing is that she is stirring the pot, and she is sometimes oblivious. And I love that she'll go on social media like only she does, and take these down. I can't believe you showed that. I'm not showing up to work today. Just plays right through it. She is not going to step out of character and acknowledge that. She's not going to thank her fans in a genuine way. That's what I like about her. She keeps it on all the time. But in a way that she can keep it on all the time, and I'm entertained by her all the time. There's a lot of value in that. I compare that to what Chad Gable has done. I compare that to what Miz has done. I always say if I had to start a wrestling company, Miz would be a top 10 pick. Why? Because I know I can put him anywhere on the card. I know he can represent the company. I know he can deal with celebrities. I know he can help get people over. I know he can now play a baby face and a heel. I think Chelsea Green is following a similar path, and guess what? That's going to get you paid, booked, and under contract for a long time. Yeah, used to be on Tough Enough. That is someone, when you hear, oh, I wish they would push her, or I wish they would do more. If you're looking, she's always seems to be there. She gets time to talk. She can work. She can put people over. She fills up minutes in the best way possible. And I know a lot, I could see the chat here talking up how good she is. And I do think that is being acknowledged a lot more now. But to her credit, she's not trying to be a cool heel. There is a way that you can acknowledge that and still keep the crowd at arm's length. That you're not fully embracing them. Where she's very much like, you should be cheering for me. Look at all my adoring fans. That's how you handle that. So, up and coming wrestlers, people trying to find their way, watch what she has done. And understand that when you get to appear on as much as she does, win, lose, or draw, egg on her face or not looking good, the fact that she is used in so many different ways, and you never come out of a segment going, ooh, that wasn't very good. That is value. And that is a push in its own. And maybe one day that will lead to a women's championship reign. It could absolutely work. Chelsea as a Money in the Bank winner would be fantastic. I understand why they went with Tiffany, but Chelsea Green as a Money in the Bank holder, as Miss Money in the Bank, would be great television. It would make perfect sense with Piper to protect her, to cash in on a babyface. That makes sense. That works. So, praise for Chelsea Green. The value of her is strong right now, and she is someone whose stock I would want to own in WWE. Let's move on to Dynamite tonight. Some matches, some big segments announced. Jon Moxley live, and Mariah and Queen Aminata, Jack Perry and Lio Rush. But a match that they announced that I wanted to stop and talk about was Ricochet and Sammy Guevara. If you don't know, Sammy Guevara has recently returned. Now a tag champ in Ring of Honor with Dustin Rhodes. More of a babyface presentation now. And you put him up against Ricochet. So I see that match after Ricochet has worked Kyle Fletcher. I see Samuel Guevara and Ricochet, and I go, okay, I think I know what they're going for. I think let's put Ricochet on full display to do all the Ricochet stuff against someone who wrestles in a similar way. To me, that's putting a spectacular match on to spotlight Ricochet, which is fine. Because it did feel weird that, we saw him in the gauntlet at All In. And then we saw him wrestle Kyle Fletcher a few days later on Dynamite. And then what? He appears at All Out backstage in a confrontation with Will Ospreay, which is something they're clearly teasing to, and we will get to. And there's history there. And that's fine. Here's my question. Is Ricochet's draw, and will it continue to be the draw or interest in Ricochet just being that he's Ricochet and the matches he has? Because I know from covering him, from working there, from interviewing him, from analyzing his matches, that he is always going to be someone, I think, to a live crowd that stands out more because of his athleticism and the moves he does and all that. And I actually think there's a way to market him that WWE probably didn't do enough, and we'll see if AEW does. Almost similar to how AEW is treating Hologram. I think that's a superhero type character. I always thought that's how Ricochet should have been presented. He'll tell you himself, he's tweeted it, he's not a great promo. Talking is not going to be the first thing you mention when it comes to Ricochet. But his stuff stands out. To me, he's like one of the first gifable wrestlers. And his gifts from years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, are still out there. And there is value to that, especially in this day and age. We talk about all the time. You've got to catch people here. You've got to catch them quickly. You've got to catch their eye. And I think what he does and how his presentation can be shown, it can do that. He can be that guy. But it's who you're marketing to. How does Ricochet set himself apart? What would you want to see? If you watch Ricochet for the last, whatever the heck, 5, 6, 7, 8 years in WWE, you know his work in Japan, in New Japan, in Dragon Gate. You've seen him in PWG, all that stuff. What has the evolution of Ricochet been? Probably not a whole lot. Stands out because of what he does. Is that enough? Is that enough in AEW? Because to me, it's not. To me, that's someone who might get, I don't want to say get lost in the shuffle, but wouldn't be different than other spectacular wrestlers in AEW. He can have a great match, and then what? That's always, I think, been the thing with him. What happens next? Where does he go after a great match? Why am I sinking my teeth into him as a character? He's going to have a spectacular display against Sammy Guevara tonight. That's why it's there. I get that. But what makes that different from the guy we've just seen? Does that put a ceiling on him? Which is weird to say because of how high he can jump. But you know what I'm saying? As a character, as a push, is the Ricochet from the last 6 or 7 years a Ricochet that can show up in AEW and be believably pushed higher up the card? Or is that just not going to be his role ever? Is that something you'd want to see? Do you want to see more depth to Ricochet? Do you see the potential of Ricochet as a main eventer? Because it seems like it's been the same guy. Now, people are bringing up Lucha Underground. It was Prince Puma. Still wrestling the same way. But there's character to him. He's in storylines. You know, you think about what happened with Braun. He got beat up. People have mentioned he could have been in the Hurt Business. I think he would benefit from being in a group. Maybe someone getting his feats, his athleticism over. He needs that big promoter for it. I think he needs a heel run. I said that months ago. He decided to not re-sign with WWE. He wanted to go elsewhere. He landed where you'd expect. He's going to appear in GLEAT in Japan. He still says he has stuff to do in New Japan. I understand that. But what have we hit the ceiling on Ricochet already? And if we have, is this what he's going to be? Puts on great matches. Ricochet, the guy who puts on great matches. He's going to join a list of other people who put on great matches. I see Don Callis being brought up by Pixels and Thoughts. I have thought about that. That might work. I think it's at least worth a look of. I think it's a spot for Ricochet where let's see how much, as he has said in interviews, he wants to speak up. He wants to change how he's booked. How much more depth is there to Ricochet? Which leads me to an interview that Adam Copeland did in the last couple of days here, as he obviously still injured, working his way back. He did this interview for AM New York, talking about his workout and stuff like that. And I want to read the quote here from Adam Copeland. It feels like we're getting more storyline emphasis because dream matches can only happen so often. And how sustainable is it? Story is always sustainable. Good story can last and last and last, and then you can always revisit it. And I look at the Hangman Swerve story, and I just love watching the slow progression. And I agree with that sentiment, and I'm glad it came from Adam Copeland. I think you can present those dream matches. I'm okay with that. I also think sometimes those dream matches can't just stand alone. Sometimes they can be the start of something. Because people are, oh, but there's no story. Hey, sometimes stuff starts because of a match. Sometimes it starts the other way around. A match leads to something. An interaction leads to something. A great match between Sammy Guevara and Ricochet tonight maybe does lead to Ricochet getting recruited by Don Callis or a Stokely Hathaway. Think about that. But they shouldn't just be standalone. And you can have these dream matches and also put a story behind them. You're going to get that very likely with Will Ospreay and Ricochet. And I would think, because of the partnership, they're going to be able to use footage of the famous Will Ospreay Ricochet match in New Japan. And you're going to be able to tell that story, and we're going to revisit that dream match. I liked that they talked about the one and only and brief history between Ospreay and Pac. They didn't have a lot of time to build that match, but they made the most of that time, and then those guys tore it down. And Ospreay said, hey, I was a different guy back then. So you can have these dream matches, and you have all of the talent you need to put these dream matches on. The stuff hasn't happened yet. Hollywood Blondes would love to see Adam Copeland and Shelton Benjamin. I didn't have that dream match on my board. I didn't even think of that. I don't know what Shelton's doing. But the idea of a dream match. There have been ones that haven't been touched yet. I'm sure Adam Copeland would love to work a lot more people. I think there is a hell of an Adam Copeland Swerve feud out there. I think there's a hell of an Adam Copeland Hangman angle out there. There's a lot that he hasn't done yet. And you can get to those dream matches, but you have to set the match-ups first. You have to tell some of those stories. And that's another point, is that it's a mix. It's a mix of those things. Your full card is going to have a squash match or an obvious win for somebody. It's going to have a match that's been built for some reason. Queen Aminata and Mariah May built off the interaction between the two of them, and Sky blew it all out. So you've built that for a couple weeks. But the idea of a dream match, if it's very obvious, you can just say that. But sometimes those stories need to be told. If you see Ricochet and Will Ospreay and say, oh, that's a dream match in 2024, sure. You know what? People haven't seen them face off before. People may have only been a Ricochet fan from WWE, and they've heard about Will Ospreay. And you have to think that way. I know that's kind of wild, especially if you're in this chat. You know who those guys are. But there are people who are in the WWE bubble, and it's a big bubble, and it's a big money-making bubble, and they haven't seen Will Ospreay. Or they haven't seen a lot of them. And maybe Ricochet's fans will then follow him. And they go, oh my God, I heard about this Ospreay guy. And now that match can happen. And you can present it in a certain way where people are more intrigued because maybe they don't know the story. Maybe they don't know the history. And now you add a story to the dream match. Is Kenny Omega versus Adam Copeland a dream match? For some people, yes. Canadian wrestling royalty. That's not a match you just put on, though. And I know Adam and Kenny would both say that. That is a match that you build to make a dream match feel even bigger. That is a match that you can start with they're on the same side of a tag. They've had, what, one interaction, I think, on Dynamite or Collision? There's a story to be built for that. Dream matches as one-offs should be few and far between. And if they are a one-off, they should be building to other things. To me, that will give you more reason to care about a dream match. So Adam talking about stories, if there is not a better example of needing to, and actually telling a story in a very long, big, detailed, and important way for wrestling as a whole, but maybe AEW, Swerve and Hangman. Swerve and Hangman has interest, has had interest, will continue to have interest the next time that they interact or there's a tease of their interaction. Because it's been going on for so long, because it's been nuanced, because Adam Page has had to come back just for Swerve. While Swerve did other things, it's the best thing about wrestling these days. It doesn't seem like there's nearly as much tunnel vision. And I say that about AEW, and I say that about WWE. You might have a main rival at the time, but there's still other things going on. And there's other ways to interact with other people. And you could start to plant the seeds for other things. Swerve and Hangman are a great example of how investing time in talent and characters and production, from the home invasion stuff to the fire to backstage, to the video packages. It's gauging interest. It's gaining interest. I think it sold tickets for the show on Saturday. I truly believe that. And there's no metric to say that there's an answer to that. But I think they had a nice run of ticket sales leading up to All Out and got over 9,000 and pushed, I think, what was close to a sellout for what they had set up, which everybody does, because of what they did with Hangman and Swerve. I think a main event feud sold tickets for them. Pixels and thoughts. I wouldn't have bought the pay-per-view without that moment. So dream matches are important. But they have to be important to everyone. That's how you grow your fan base. That's how you grow the fan base of the wrestlers. That's how you grow the fan base of the company. And that's what's going to sell tickets. And that's what's going to draw ratings. Dream matches on their own will not make money long term. Dream matches that are building to something or dream matches that are built by a story is how you make money in this business. See what happens with Ricochet tonight with Sammy Guevara, and let's see how AEW follows a lot of things up. We will, of course, get into more of that and the top stories from AEW tomorrow on the show, and any news that may come down, who knows. But I hope you can keep supporting us. Go to thewrestlingmatchshow.com. Some clips today, all kinds of stuff going up. Our talk about Sid has gone up. More about Gunther as a world champion. My hope for tonight about the Outrunners and the tag team gauntlet, the Casino Gauntlet, which is, I see a lot of people are hoping for that tonight. We'll be talking about that, though. We will be talking about more of that tomorrow. But become a member. Join down below. Dom, show them the membership tiers. I want to tell you what we have coming up here. You start right above Todd. It's a base level. You see what you get there. We'll have another members only AMA coming up very soon. The discounted merchandise, as I said yesterday, you'll have our merchandise coming very, very, very soon to Pro Wrestling Tees. The very simple Wrestling Mat logos will be available at Pro Wrestling Tees for you to put on a shirt. If you go up to the Matt Camper level, you get all of that at the first level. Plus, you'll get members-only videos. Coming out this month, we're going to talk about my onboarding as an employee to WWE, how the company looked at AEW debuting on Dynamite, NXT moving to USA, which happens about a month from today, 5 years ago. Also the day the bump debuted. All that happened on the same night. We're going to be watching a random episode of Raw, SmackDown, Dynamite. One of those episodes live. We'll let you know about that. And if you're at the Matt event level, hey, you could be like B-May, who's in the chat today. He's a member. He got that 30-minute private Zoom. Who's it going to be this month? Who, at that level, may get to pick what private past wrestling watch-along that we take part in. The great nerdy dude, the Santa Claus of Matt memberships, selected us to watch Raw in Berlin from 1997, leading into WrestleMania 13 a couple weeks ago. We watched Bash in Berlin here with the Matt members. That's what you are missing out on if you're not a Matt member. And if you're listening on the Believe Network because you're a podcast listener, first of all, thank you for the support. Rate, review, and subscribe. And come on over to thewrestlingmatchshow.com. There's so much more here. And you get the episodes of this show live first here on YouTube before anything else. But please, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, you can do that on all the major podcast platforms. Please do so. The support really helps the show. Those episodes hit the podcast feed about an hour after the live episode happens here on YouTube. You can go back and listen to past episodes. It's another great way to take in the show, and your support has been able to put us on the Believe Network. I thank you for the support. And I thank Nerdy Dude for giving out 5 more Wrestling Mat memberships. So claim them now. That is awesome. Dennis gets one. That's cool. The Nerdy Dude only helping out the people here. It's a very interactive, fun community. I like to call it the most interactive pro wrestling show out there because I like talking to all of you. So make sure you are taking a look at the Matt memberships down below. You can join there. See what you're missing out on if you're not a Matt member. Make sure you go to thewrestlingmatchshow.com. We had our community vote up on the NXT show last night. We'll have more of those, of course. And you can go back and watch past full live episodes of the show. You can go back and watch some of the segments that we have taken out here from the show that you may just want to clip out 10, 12 minutes long, whatever they might be. Go back and watch some of our old interviews on the show. We've had Joe Hendry on the show, Broke on this show. He exclusively revealed to us that he was training at the Performance Center. That happened here on the Wrestling Mat. Before it hit all the wrestling headlines, and some people linked to the show and some people didn't, he said it here first. Matt Cardona's been on the show. Joey Janela has been on the show. Talked to Dan Reichert from Giant Bomb about our time together in WWE when he ran the podcast team. The great Chef Reactions, who will hopefully getting back on here soon. Famed first pitch thrower for the St. Paul minor league baseball team. He's been here on the show. So go back and check out what we have to offer at thewrestlingmatshow.com. Make sure you're following us on social media at WrestlingMat23. You won't miss anything in terms of announcements, what we have coming up on the show. Love to interact with you on there, both on Twitter and Instagram, and myself at The Matt Camp. So plenty more to come. We'll be talking all the big news from Dynamite tomorrow, when I'll be back to talk about wrestling even more right here each and every weekday, including tomorrow on the Wrestling Mat.